Meet me at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good morning. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. With me, as always, Alan Medlock, A Medlock 1, coming to you on Saturday morning after the Cardinals have dropped a game to the New York Yankees. And after what was a very, I don't know, chaotic might be the best word, week for the Cardinals. Well, I think the moves a lot of times had you understood them when you put them all together, and especially with the way that this last month has gone. It just felt like everybody was discombobulated.
Yeah, I think that you explained it best. Well, not even explained it, just kind of we were asking what we both thought was going on, and it's it's kind of rudderless, no direction right now. It's very strange. I think that we say this all the time, or I say it all the time, and won't corner you with this one, but man, I would love to be the fly on the wall in some of these conversations. Because we're thinking, man, this is just shoot from the hip type stuff, but you kind of wonder that if there's not something, bigger in play and what that may be. I'm not sure, but this was, it was, as far as performance wise, it's nice to go in and split a series. I mean, we kind of know where they are right now. I mean, we're honest with each other, and then you lose the one last night, but it's the roster buildup and things that we've seen that it's just been puzzling.
Yeah, and I think it's somewhat a factor of this new era of no waiver trades, right? But
Yes.
it still feels weird to see the Cardinals trade for guys a month ago and then put them on waivers, right? So basically, and granted, the guys they put on waivers, Shawn Armstrong, Tommy Pham, guys that made an impact. They weren't bad, although Pham has been struggling after his first little bit.
Yeah.
But you knew that they were 1-year deal guys, so it wasn't like they were going to be long-term parts of this team. But when you look at that trade deadline, that we were all kind of, hey, this is not a terrible trade deadline. Only piece left is Eric Fetty, right? And then granted, that was the big piece, but it still feels kind of weird that in a month these guys are gone. And the reason they're gone is so they can go play for a team, hopefully get on with a team that's going to the playoffs. Shawn Armstrong got on with the Cubs, so maybe that didn't work out quite the same way. Although they are ahead of the Cardinals in the standings. But it still just feels strange to make such a big deal about bringing these guys in. Tommy Pham, and we talk about this, right? Tommy Pham didn't really have a spot now because you're going to bring up Jordan Walker and play him every day. Because I mean, if this was a wave the white flag week, I think that's just fair. I mean, they could have done it earlier, but the fact that the players apparently made such a big deal about getting Tommy Pham, we got those stories when they traded for him about, all he was talking about players coming up to him by name, saying, "Hey, we need Tommy Pham," and we not a guy like Tommy, but Tommy Pham. And then for him, for them to turn around and release him in a month, I'm sure the clubhouse understands everything, but it still feels a little bit weird to have made such a focus on. We really wanted this player to just cut him loose in 30 days.
Yeah, no, I thought about something similar to those lines. Is the fact that on the positive spin of that, you want to be like, okay, look, they're trying to give him a chance to go catch on in the next couple of days before rosters are locked and he can go play somewhere. You know what I mean? That's funny. But then when you remember those stories, you're thinking, how many other veterans are in the clubhouse who don't have that luxury would be like, well, heck, release me, and I'd like to go play for a competitor right now. I thought about that whenever the word started leaking out that he was on waivers, but that waivers is such a it is. I do like this time of year. I kind of like the non-trade. I like the second deadline. Like it used to be. Him put on waivers this week, and it's always made such a big deal. But I was like, well, this makes a lot of sense because they're gonna call up and play guys, to set it up for next year. Mm-hmm. But in the back of my mind, I did think about that on the leadership side of it. I kind of wondered how many other guys were thinking that must be pretty nice.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. And it's a little bit surprising a few other guys that were on 1-year deals didn't have that happen to them, right? Like Kittredge or something like that. Somebody that might catch on. I don't think, they weren't going to end Paul Goldschmidt's tenure in St. Louis that way. I mean,
no.
Happen. And I don't think he'd want that either, right? I mean, he's not looking even what could be his last month. I don't know that he's necessarily wanting to join a team in progress like that. Assuming anybody would take, I'm sure somebody would take him, especially once he cleared waivers and was getting the league minimum. But I don't know that that's what he's looking for. So I don't know. It's, again, the moves make sense. And it's honestly a good thing to see because earlier in the week, after they had released Shawn Armstrong, which was a bit surprising, right? He pitched pretty well. And so, again, when we're, the motivation is different for releasing a guy here versus releasing a guy in May or June. But still, it was a little bit surprising that they didn't just, run out the clock with him. But earlier in the week, like the day before, Katie Wu comes out and says that the organization doesn't have any plans to waive Tommy Pham because they still think they're contending team. And that was a little bit concerning to me. All right. Because, they were where they are now, right? Basically they're 12 games out. They're 7 games out in the wild card. They're, behind 3 or 4 teams. They're not a contending team.
Yeah.
And if the front office is, and the front office is thinking that they're a contending team, then that is like, what is going on? Where's the disconnect here?
Yeah. Even let's just put it, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, whichever it was. It may have been last week since I had to miss the week before. Mm-hmm. The math had to be, they had to play at like 650, right? Last week just to get back into it and jump 3 or 4 different teams. And that's one of those to where you're like, well, that's going to have to be on a run that no one else in baseball is doing right now and hasn't really done all year, so you have to tear the cover off the ball at that point. But I understand a little bit of the positivity on it. And I kind of understand the positive spin from the front office, because maybe that's things that they potentially have to say. I don't know. I know that we'll probably get into this later in the show, but the attendance shows that they know where they know what's going on. The fans that aren't showing up know that it's kind of a lost summer at this point. Regroup and hopefully rebuild for next year, and that's positive spin for me. But the front office, they can't come out and say, we get it, no one's coming. It's everybody's giving up on us. That's not necessarily the mindset. It's just kind of the reality of it. And those kind of comments. I don't know. It's just I would like to see the figures that they had come up with to think that, or why they would think that, and not the hard questions to be like, okay, now I kind of get it, but it's tough to find a rationalization with it now.
Yeah, and to be fair, it was the next day they went ahead and released him, so it wasn't. It may even mm-hmm. I can't remember because exactly or put him on waivers, and so it wasn't. They weren't really held to that, and maybe I think to some degree also when we heard afterwards that they sat down, they sat with Pham. I guess Marmol and Pham had some conversations, and basically it sounded like Pham was ready. He said, "Hey, I think I need to go." I think he kind of drove this, which is good in some degree because he did make such a big deal about coming to St. Louis. But I also wonder if that was like, they're saying they were kind of trying to, keep that cover story of being a contending team because they weren't, they didn't want to release Pham without his, without him being on the same page, and they hadn't had those conversations yet. It could be. And again, nobody came out on record. It was just Katie saying, that was her reporting from people she talked to, which I'm sure she talked to. I'm not questioning that at all. I'm just saying that it wasn't like an official, interview of John Mozeliak or anybody like that. But so I'm sure that there was some public relations in that and just covering things. But yeah, you're right. I think attendance is probably the biggest story of the week, right? Even more so than all of this, roster movement, because the Cardinals have set the lowest non-pandemic attendance numbers in Busch Stadium history, and they've done it like 4 days in a row, right? I mean, it's a continually spiraling down number, and that's tickets sold, and we can obviously see from pictures and video and all that actual attendance is much less than tickets sold. So you're right. I don't. If there's a lot of people that don't think that anything's going to change this offseason, and maybe won't. I'd be surprised just because, that's part of what they do here, right? I mean, that's, they have 3 million plus fans, and, that's where, the budget is based on. And when they're not going to get there, and when they're not going to get there in such drastic measures, I mean, when it's looking like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and those kind of places, that's got to be a shot to the pride of the people that own the Cardinals, right? And are in charge of the Cardinals. And I think that they're going to have to do something this winter. And I know the argument is that they're not going to put money into it because they're going to say they don't have money to put into it because nobody showed up. And that's one possibility, but I would hope that they're smart enough to realize that they're going to have to invest in something here to get people to come back to the ballpark next year.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's it. That was well said, because I thought about a lot of things where you're talking, and that's the one thing that this is the most. I remember the terrible times in the 90s, after Whitey Ball and all that. And I remember, but I was fairly young. This is the shot of this is kind of the, I don't know how to say it. This has got to be the biggest needle mover that we've seen in a long time, because, apathy sets in, and that not only is a shot at their pride, it's a shot at their tradition and the standards. And that's the standards and expectations have always been that there's going to be people in the seats and we're going to build a contender, because playing around 500, that's not what this organization is, and we thought last year was kind of the outlier, and I'm on record of saying that. And now we can see that, man, there's just a down tilt to it, and there needs to be some change in direction. But that was the gut punch to me. And then to see that they were giving free tickets away, and considering it was a day game and all that good stuff. I mean, I get it. School's back in session. Those seats are hard to fill. I understand. But yeah, that's one of those to where I'm thinking, okay, this is the biggest statement that's been made in a long time, that we're going to have to change the way that we do business, and we're going to have to get out of the middling category, and we're going to have to go pretty bold, in our next 5-year phase plan. Something's going to have to change. My concern comes from what you said of the built-in excuse of, hey, not enough people were there, so we didn't build enough revenue. That concerns me, because I want to say this as a fan and somebody that's a competitor, and I would like to be like, this is embarrassing, and we're getting called out on other teams' broadcasts, and even the ones that the Mark Grants, the Padres, the good guys.
Mm-hmm.
They're calling them out and saying, "Hey, this used to be intimidating. It's not intimidating anymore." And what worries me is that they have the ability, I think, to change that in an off season and not build it back completely fully. But if they do the middling aspect of it, it's going to take time to build that back, and this could get a lot worse. I mean, as a competitor, I'm going out right away and I'm saying, no one's outbidding us for Burns.
Mm-hmm.
If we need pitching and that's our issue, no one's outbidding us for Burns. We're finally going to do this. We're going to go see, and we're going to kick around tires to see what we can do to get Montgomery out of that contract to opt out. He's pitching in the bullpen in Arizona right now. We're going to see what we can do to get this better and to bring some names in to where we can start putting some posters up and building a little more positivity on it, and not so much at the we're going to be good if situation, because that's kind of what's happened. And I think the if has given a lot of people pause to believe that those things are going to work out for the best. And I think it's really, really shined a light on ownership. And I think that I think it's really hurt. I think Mo is going to be a Hall of Fame front office guy. With his run, it's long. It doesn't happen very often. He's very, very good. But I do think now you can start to see that his hands were tied to quite a bit in some of these moves. And I know that they've spent money and it's kind of been dumb money, and that's probably going to go on him. But I think that we've seen that it's been hampered from the top.
Yeah, I think that's fair. While you were talking, I was kind of sorting back through attendance reports here, and it looks like Cardinals right now are 7th in overall attendance, which is kind of low for them. I going through the last 20 years, a couple times most of the time they're in the top 4. Occasionally they've been 6th. It was 2004, actually 20 years ago, that they were 8th. Which is a little bit surprising, right? That was such a good team that it's surprising that they were lower, but maybe I don't know if they've added capacity since then or not. But they've got a real good chance here. They're 7th at 36,150 average, and it sorts by average. Houston's at 34,787. Toronto's at 33,901. San Francisco's 33,621. If they keep the rate that they're going the rest of the year, they've got a good chance of maybe. They got at least a non-zero chance of falling out of the top 10 or being 10th. And that like you say, I hope that's that kind of wake up call.
Yeah.
No,
keep going. I was going to give my best guess if that could happen.
Well, go ahead. No,
I'm going to look at the schedule again. Okay. You got the Friday, Saturday, Sunday with the Mariners. There's a chance that was going to be pretty good, but that midweek series with the Reds will not.
No. That
midweek series with the Pirates won't.
Nope.
And then you finish with the Guardians, which that there's a chance that could be pretty good just because last week of the season. But man, I'm telling you that it's going to be cutting it close.
Yeah. I will say that the only thing I think might be interesting for people is the fact that now, Jordan Walker's been returned. He's going to play every day. You've got Victor Scott II, who's playing every day. You're probably going to have Lars Nootbaar for the most part out there every day, right? You're going to have Masyn Winn, who has been playing almost every day, and I'm almost a little concerned about, how much he can do, but he's playing so well. You've got Donovan. You've got Goldie. Goldie making his last run, maybe in St. Louis. And Goldie and Arenado both have started to hit over the last week or two.
Yes.
Which is nice to see. You've got Herrera playing every other day or something like that. Maybe not as much as maybe he should, but that's a different story. I think that the lineup right now is intriguing, right? And there are players that I think people would want to see. Whether they can overcome the fact that the team's not good or is mediocre or blah overall, and who depends on who's starting that day and what they've got, because you could see a good Miles Michaelis. You could also see a Miles Michaelis gives up 4 home runs and the game's out of hand.
It's tough.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the pool is. I don't know if there's a pool there to see those guys, or it's like, hey, I'll just watch them on TV and they'll be around. But I think I hope you're seeing that core of what you're going to have next year, right?
Yes.
And we talked about it. I'll probably back in the spring. How interesting and how much of a personality that this team could have with Walker, Winn, and Scott all together. And we're finally going to get a chance to see. I think we've seen a little bit of that with Winn and Scott, right? And add a Jordan Walker into this, especially if he gets going, because I think if he gets comfortable and everything of that nature. If nothing else, it could be at least some fun personalities on this team.
Yes, that. I'm glad you brought that up. Last night's lineup, I was like, all right, this adds a little bit. This adds a little bit of fun to it, to kind of see what they have. You throw Contreras in that, and you're thinking that looks pretty similar to what it will probably, we hope, look like. Well, what it probably will look like next year. I was going to say hope, but I was like, man, I'd like to be in the market for maybe a big bat in the off season, but we're probably going to be, let's be realistic about it. Probably not going to happen. But no, I actually watched every pitch last night for that very reason. I was like, let's just see, this is going to be fun to watch, and enjoyed it, and being Yankee Stadium, that adds to it too. But yeah, I think that there's going to be a little bit of a draw like that, to where I think that let's see what the future looks like, and let's add a little bit of intrigue, and that may work. They've sprinkled in enough of these guys where there's not a huge draw, and I wanted to look and I didn't, but is there a chance that one of their younger guys could start a game down the stretch to try to get some people in the stands?
I don't know. I mean, the most interesting name, of course, is Quinn Matthews.
Yeah, that's who I thought. Matthews.
Yeah, he just made his debut at Memphis, and this is his fourth level of the year. I really can't see it. Plus the fact they have to add him to the 40-man and all that kind of stuff, and I don't think that they would do that. I think they'd like to have him have the option of coming to camp next year and making the team, but not being forced to put him on the roster yet.
Yeah.
So no, I'd be really surprised there. Now, could you see somebody like McGreevy or Graceffo or somebody like that that's already on the 40-man come up and make a start? Maybe. I do think that with Steven Matz is probably going to be activated this weekend. They said he's with them on the team, and the rosters expand tomorrow. He'll probably be activated when that happens. Lance Lynn will probably be back at some point in time pretty soon. I think they've got enough of these guys that's going to be really difficult for them to. Now, if somebody else has a setback or goes, on the injured list for the rest of the year, maybe, but I think it'll be difficult for them to find a spot for those guys, even if they should. I'm not saying, I'm just talking about contracts and veteran stuff and all that. I'm not talking about, whether that helps the team win or anything like that. I think that it would be interesting to see McGreevy again, just to see if what we saw that last time was legitimate. Because I think he's pitched a little bit better in Memphis as well. I'd have to look it up. But I've never been a huge fan of McGreevy, but he obviously had a great debut, and I think he's put him in the conversation for at least more of a look.
Yeah, that's it's completely agree. And I was thinking, what can they spin here to make this to make this happen, or to drive some interest, because that's obviously the direction they've gone with the lineup a little bit. I don't know. I just think there's ways to do it, but you're right. It's one of those to where you're playing with a little bit of roster fire. You don't want to start the process, one of those things. But it's kind of a knee jerk. You're right. It's not. There's not a lot of direction, but you still want to see if there's some chance to build a little bit interest. We both hope they play well for obvious reasons. I hope they play well for a little bit of momentum moving forward and to get some people in the stadium.
Yeah. I that would be nice for sure. I mean, I hate seeing the pictures that there's a whole lot of empty seats there, and
it's tough.
And I mean, that's not the experience, especially these young guys coming up, have been kind of indoctrinated in. They expect Busch Stadium to be full and loud and all that kind of stuff. And now they're playing in, well, like I said, they can't tell if they're at home or if they're in Cincinnati to some degree. And that's difficult. I mean, it'll make for a great time when it fills back up, I guess. But yeah, my hesitation on some of these young guys is one. I guess the biggest one is I don't know on the pitching side. We've seen on the hitting side them bring these guys up too fast, right? We've had this whole issue with Jordan Walker, and we've had this, Nolan Gorman's down in the minors now, and I don't know if they rushed him, but I think one of the benefits of Masyn Winn playing most of last year at AAA was what we're seeing this year. I don't know if that's the same on the pitching side of things, but I think I would like to make sure, especially somebody like a Matthews, gets some solid run at Memphis. And there's just, I mean, he made his debut yesterday, so he's going to get 4 or 5 starts at AAA before the season's over. That's my, besides the roster issues, that's my biggest hesitation is I just don't want these guys coming up too fast, because I think that if they're getting good instruction in the minor leagues, and on the hitting side, they're probably getting better instruction. It feels like, doesn't it? Then I'd rather them get really confident in their abilities before they make that final step.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it leads to a bunch, and that whole conversation leads or kind of points to another question of how good are these guys going to be? The young guys coming up, because there used to be a certain amount. I think some of this is the fact that Walker hadn't panned out yet,
Right.
because like we always talk about, we beat it down so much, and we haven't given him a whole heck of a run. Before we start saying it's a failure, that's just that's the nature of the beast with the with us essentially. The there's not that one name that like okay, they're ready. This is gonna be awesome. And I was thinking it may be Hintz before, but he'll probably be in Memphis next year, correct?
Yeah, I would think so.
And
I
then
think yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, you're good. And then there's just not that name, but I just think right now everything's on a downtrend, and that just goes to show that there's going to have to be some decisions made quickly to change the direction, if there is a direction per se.
Well, and that that kind of leads into stuff we've talked about, and the fact that we don't have to hit on it too much, but this front office may get that direction changed this off season, right? I mean, may get another president of baseball operations, and Mo goes to do something else, or there's some talk about him, being advisor to whoever they do hire.
Yeah,
and if that's the case, though, if they get another guy in here, I mean, that's especially coming from outside the organization, especially if it's not a Mike Gersh or a Randy Flores, you're going to have a different approach to a lot of this stuff. We know Chaim Bloom has done all this, writing reports and looking at the whole organization top to bottom. I'm still not 100% sure that Chaim Bloom's the guy they go with, although it's probably the favorite. Somebody mentioned, maybe Kareem on Twitter this week, mentioned Sig McDowell
oh
of
yeah,
Baltimore, who of course started in the Cardinal organization. He was here under Ludnow, left when Ludnow did to go to Houston. I think that would be a guy that would be very interesting, because a guy that's been in 2 or 3 organizations now, but still has an idea of how Cardinals run, but may also know how they need to change. I think that would be an interesting move. I don't know. Again, it's hard to know what the Cardinals will do, but yeah, I think that we're going to see. I mean, you got to see a different direction, right? This is not 1 year you can write off as a fluke, 2 years as a
yep,
trend, right? And they can't have a third year of this without some sort of plan, right? If they
agreed.
said they went into next year and said, okay, we're playing Victor Scott every day, we're playing Jordan Walker every day, we're playing Masyn Winn every day, we're gonna have, even if Quinn Matthews is ready, maybe Quinn Matthews is ready, we're gonna have him start every 5th day, and let the chips fall where they may. I think at least people would understand that, okay, they're building something here. It's not it's not a complete tank or anything like that, but there's going to be some growing pains and things like that. And I think that would get people back in the stands more than just, well, same old, same old.
Oh, agreed. I mean, I think that you probably do have to go that direction or go very big this offseason to change the mindset at this point. That was the biggest gut punch to me. Is you just like, hey, this second year in a row, and that's pretty sad. And it's tough to go and listen. I mean, I like a lot of the guys in the rotation right now, and I'm not just picking on the rotation, but I like a lot of those guys. But I think that you're going to have to kind of change the dynamic of what that is. I mean, and it's the reason I bring up Burns is A, he's a stud and I love him,
right?
But B, you're going to be competing against everybody, and I don't know if even with what Baltimore has, I don't know if they're going to go all in, because it's kind of the same situation the Cardinals are in, and because they just can't necessarily afford it because they see what's on the horizon of guys that they're going to have to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have the bigs. We know that. But you know him. He's a central guy. I think that you have to go. If you don't go a mini teardown and step back and go into a more development phase, I think that's the direction you have to go. And I think that you have to get arms that perform at the level that Lynn Gibson and these guys have this year. They have to be able to do it all year. And I think if you pair that with a Gray, I think that you're going to be all right. But you're gonna have to pay for performance.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it this offseason, right? We thought they needed to get 3 guys better than Miles Michaelis. They got 1, and at times, Gray's had a rough stretch, which I mean you didn't necessarily expect as badly as he pitched at times. But if you can get a guy like Burns and push Gray to second and then Fetty to third, that rotation looks a whole lot better, right?
Yeah.
Especially because you don't know if Fetty's going to be. I mean, he's been all right since he came to St. Louis. No great shakes, and you don't know how much of that's going to carry over versus what he did with the White Sox, especially in the second year back in the league. I don't think you want to go into the year with him as your number 2. So yeah, I think and there's an argument there that the payroll in theory, I mean, and it depends on how you do all the accounting and stuff like that, but some of that payroll gets less, right? I mean, you're going to have a Walker and you're going to have a Milwin and a Scott all at league minimum. You're going to have a Burleson that I think is still at league minimum. Gorman's hitting his first year of arbitration. But still, for the most part, that's a young, fairly cost-controlled lineup, right? Except for Arenado, once Goldschmidt's off the books, and Contreras. So, and unfortunately, there's a lot of money tied up in the rotation with Matz and Michaelis. That is, I don't want to say dead money, but it feels like it, right?
Problematic.
Yeah. And so, if you could get somebody to take on even part of that salary and you trade one of those guys, that would be maybe something. But I agree. I think there's an option in that a big bat would be good, but you also wonder where you put them with all the young guys that you've got scattered around.
Without a doubt.
And you kind of want to see if these guys can do it. But if you could bring in, I think if you could bring in a top-notch pitcher, the look of this team, I don't think anybody's picking them to win the division just because of the last 2 years, but the look of this team becomes a whole lot more exciting when you feel like you've got good pitching and this exciting young lineup out there every day.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, it's the lineup like we talked about last week is what you can't do is completely count on bounce back seasons from Arenado and Goldschmidt. I think that you get into a lot of trouble with that. Do you believe that Burleson and Winn have made the jump to? I mean, I do. I think that they're going to be everyday lineup guys. I think that there's an there's a line of thought out there that Burleson will potentially peak out at a platoon type split guy, but I'm not so certain of that yet. I mean, that's kind of, we pigeonhole these guys early a lot of times, but yeah, I heard that. I mean, it was Miklas that said it. I think that you have to look at improving the offense at some point. I mean, and I say that by, you've got to get some kind of certainty, not thinking I knew Bar was hurt and he's going to have to, he'll bounce back. But he's one of the guys that if he gets hurt next year, you got to think O'Neal type territory.
Yeah.
And that's a little troublesome to me. And then what do you have in Gorman? I think that you're going to have to pay for some certainty, but you're right. I don't know. Of all the names that I said, there's a whole lot of ifs on there, and that's what concerns me.
And that's true. I mean, when you run out a young team, and that mainly would be, there are a lot of ifs, and you would think there'd be a little less ifs just because of how much those guys have been. I mean, they're not rookies, most of them. They won't be next year, right? But there's still a lot of question marks. I mean, you're right. I still don't know what to make of Nolan Gorman, right? I mean, he can be so, impactful. That power is real and there. But man, when he's bad. And I think a lot of people would say it's worth the highs are worth the lows. And maybe they're right. I just haven't gotten that feeling yet. I mean, if the Cardinals were able to trade him for what he was actually worth, not what we've, not pennies on the dollar like they usually do stuff this winter, then I wouldn't be opposed to that. But I also don't currently trust that they can get the right value out of him, right? I don't, and that's the problem right now, right? I don't like Ryan Helsley would be, even with a team that's trying to return to, contention next year. You're trading Ryan Helsley on the offseason makes some sense, right? If you can get good value for him. We talked about it, last month at the trading deadline. Instead of trying to trade 4 people, they could have traded Helsley and gotten a significant haul, and then we'll argue maybe later whether that was the right call to make.
Yeah.
But I don't know, when you see how they've treated some of their assets in the past and what they've gotten in trade as of late, it's hard to feel real confident that they would trade a Helsley and get, good quality prospects that are going to contribute very soon, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I have the confidence in that right now.
And yes, no, I agree, and that's yeah, we understand that. Yes, there's a method to releasing those guys right now. Right. that they trade. We get it. But still, yeah, I mean, it's the turnarounds haven't been great, mm-hmm. And and it's one of those where even on the trade aspect, going back to Gorman, we had talked about that last year when he was having a good year at the deadline, and thought, man, I mean, you could bring in a ton if you would have moved him right now. But yeah, now it is maybe a little bit too late. I don't know. Some people may see it the other another way. Maybe in another organization they do. Don't know. But yeah, that's one of those that, to me, you're thinking, well, that you kind of have a glut where he plays anyway. I mean, unless you think he'll be at third base ultimately when it's all said and done. But I mean, that's what is Arnaud's contract right now?
Oh, let me pull it up.
When does it run out?
I'm pretty sure it is 27. But let me.
That's a long time.
It is. I will say that as I'm trying to continue, I hit the wrong thing. To find my shortcut for that. I want to say that 27 is the $17 million year that is basically was paid for by the Rockies. Let's see. Now it runs through 26. He's got 35 million next year, 32 million in 25, and 27 in 26. I thought they had added a year when they made the trade. But maybe 26 was the year they added. Anyway, that's what Cott's contract says.
Okay. And that's too much of a runway to think that Gorman's the guy there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's going to be a mystery to me because there does seem like a lot of sunk cost in the rotation and all kinds of stuff. So it's going to be an interesting offseason because I think that they're going to be try to offset some of those guys and hopefully bring in some replacements of substance. But like you and I both said, and like it's widely said in social media, they've backed themselves into a corner now to where do we trust do we trust this current front office to make the right decisions?
Yeah. I'm reading back down here in these notes. Yeah, St. Louis added a guaranteed year at $15 million for 27. Of course, $15 million is, and I think they got most of that money from the Rockies anyway. So,
Yes.
but, yeah, I don't know. I don't. I think that finding your guy that's going to be in charge of baseball operations, and I do think that's what happens this winter.
Agreed.
Whether it's a guy that comes in and say, okay, this is our guy, he's going to work under with Mo for a year, and then hits his job, something like that. But I think that's the first thing they have to do this winter. Honestly, I would love to see them do it this month. And know going into now, granted, if they're going to hire somebody that's not Chaim Bloom, they probably can't talk to people necessarily very easily that are in other organizations. But I mean, to know that, and you probably could do it in early October too, because nothing's going to happen until after the World Series. But just to have somebody on the ground and as fans to know that there's going to be at least some sort of different view. Now you're right. And you talked about it earlier. It does come down to ownership, right? And they have to be committed to adding resources if necessary. But we have also seen what Chaim Bloom and others, but definitely, he's in this conversation, have done at places like Tampa Bay, which it has a small market mentality. And I'm sure that they can work under those constraints. Now, to be fair, when one thing you don't do if you're a Tampa Bay Ray fan is get attached to a player, right?
Yeah.
They're not people that are looking at lifetime Rays or anything like that, and I think I hope there's a balance between pure statistically based transactions, and we've got to maximize our value on players, and an idea of history and legacy and this guy's face the franchise, that kind of I get you don't want to be tied down too much by sentiment, but I think as fans, part of our enjoyment of our teams is the players that are there, right?
Yes.
I mean, like this year, I think for instance, it's more exciting to have a Masyn Winn than to have some other shortstop that might be a little bit better, but might not be as personable or something like that. Again, it's not I think that's all got to be factored in. And I think, the DeWitts may have been hit a little bit hard with this, trying to keep legacy players around. We talked about it a lot, I think, when Matt Carpenter came back. And you can go overboard on it, but I think there's something really great about, one, acknowledging your history, and two, not just casting aside players as soon as they're not valuable to you.
Yeah. It goes back to, change of mindset about how they're going to get people in the stands too, in the sense that, do you want to be cold and driven? I mean, you have to be, pretty shrewd in some of these organizations, but they know what they're going to top out at money wise. And it happens. Cardinals have never been that way. They've maybe stayed too long with some of their stars, and I prefer that. I mean, here we are griping, and I mean, I prefer to do business that way. So, and that's why I fully expect Goldschmidt to be back. if he plays next year. One of those things to where these legacy guys are going to keep coming back, and I hope that there's some way that I hope that there's some plan to interweave that with improvement from the outside. And at this point, I don't know if anybody's convinced that there is.
Yeah, it's a fine line to walk.
Yeah,
for sure. Goldschmidt has hit better of late. We talked about that. We mentioned that earlier.
sure.
Does that make it more or less likely in your mind that he wants to play next year, or do you think it matters at all?
I don't know. I feel like he plays next year.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I don't know. For better or worse, I feel like he does, and there's a part of me that's like, well, maybe it'd be best if he doesn't, especially in St. Louis. Or if he walks away and isn't a star somewhere else. That's what I think that most people are concerned about. But yeah, I don't know. My gut feeling is he will be back.
His last 16 games, he's hitting .310 with OPS of 900, and 3 homers, 10 RBIs. It does kind of feel like a little bit more like the Goldschmidt that we're used to.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it a little bit easier if the Cardinals are able to. I mean, the Cardinals are not signing to an extension before he can file for free agency, because you can only allow for a 20% cut, I think, in salary. But if he's willing to come back as kind of like that part-time guy, I think there'll be a lot of people upset if they sign him to some sort of $7 or $8 million contract. But I think we're seeing that it's not completely, Goldschmidt's not completely washed up. He just may not need to be your focal point like we thought he was going to be coming into this. He may not get to play every day like he has this year, because he's played almost every day. Maybe it is more of a, I don't want to say platoon, but some sort of timeshare with Burleson or whoever else they want to play at first. But I think there could be some value in that. And I would, just like we're going back to what you're saying, it would be kind of hard to see Paul Goldschmidt in a Mets uniform or a Dodgers uniform or something like that to finish his last year or two of his career.
Yeah, that's those are the ones that, unless you go and make a huge playoff run for somebody, that also taints a legacy a little bit. It looks like a chasing money type of situation, which I don't think that's his mindset. I think it's probably a watered down contract that he comes back. I think that it will be a contract that's favorable to not only him, to probably the organization, I would think, to try to go and improve a little bit. This, like we talked about, though, I do think you have to improve that lineup in some way. And whether that's moving somebody out, I don't know, but you have to be better offensively, because I think inconsistent offense is what's killed them this year.
Yeah.
Because in theory, you got what you paid for in the rotation. Gray has been disappointing, but I don't know what your expectations were if he was going to be a Cy Young candidate. You know what I mean by that, or how high they were. I don't know, but they kept their head above water for a lot of the season, and ultimately it cracked around the All-Star break, which is going to happen when you don't have when the front of the rotation just isn't dominant. But it's the offense that's killed them, that we thought was going to be much better. And if it wasn't for Burleson and Winn, it would be terrible. Well, and Contreras was putting together a year that I think has been understated. He keeps going without getting hurt, and he's in the All-Star game pretty easy, probably with his brother.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to say anybody would be in the MVP conversation. And he wouldn't be.
Yeah.
There's a Shohei Ohtani. So there's really not a conversation. But are you looking at like a guy that gets 8th, 9th, 10th place votes on a ballot if he's healthy all year with the rate he's going? I think it's possible, right?
Yeah.
The 2 injuries have really hurt. That said, and it was just brought up on Talking About Birds this week. This is something I had half considered as well. The Cardinals have Ivan Herrera. They have Pedro Pajes. They've got Jimmy Crooks coming up. They've got 4 or 5 other catchers in the organization. if a new president of baseball operations comes in, does he look to move Wilson Contreras, figuring that that's one of the few assets that he could trade and get something significant back?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had not considered that, but you do wonder if somebody comes in knowing the value, seeing a different value out of these guys in the organization has seen, just because it's so secular, I guess you could say. That they may not have outside analysis to see it. That kind of concerns me, but there is an element to Contreras to me that is still. I say this just because he's had a great year and was having a great year, but I think that there's still kind of that odd fit with him in St. Louis, and I don't know if it's because of the history with the Cubs, but he still hasn't caught on as a true star here. Do you agree with that at all?
I think that I would agree with your overall premise that he hadn't caught on as a star. I think a lot of it though has been just like this year being out injured. Last year he was just kind of caught up in the whole this is a terrible season, and then there was that whole we're going to play him in the outfield type of all that getting thrown under the bus by the players,
Yes.
the pitchers, and stuff like that. It was all weird. He's not had a full solid year, but I will also say, um, you know, he's done everything right in not only
Yes.
how he conducts himself, but hey, I hate the Cubs now, and has the big games against them, and the emotion and things that he's shown, and how much he seems to have embraced St. Louis already. And I think that's a bit of a downside as well, right? We talked a lot this winter about players that wanted to be here, which is great. You obviously want somebody to be in St. Louis, but then it becomes harder, although maybe not since I just did the Tommy Pham. It feels to me it becomes harder to let those kind of guys go, right? You're like, hey, you
Agreed.
were all so excited about coming to St. Louis. You really enjoyed being a Cardinal and all this, and now we're trading you. And that's part of the business. I get that, and I'm sure the players do some as well. But if it's somebody that's, yeah, they like being here, but hasn't made such a point of, like I said, change their whole mindset to become a Cardinal. You hate to see that, but I'm sure that he'd trade him and he'd be really excited about whatever team he's going to next. But I don't know. I think this organization has, and it kind of goes back to what we've said already, has spent a lot of time not trading assets at their height, right? I mean, they could have traded Dylan Carlson a number of years ago and gotten more than a passing reliever. They could have traded, like I said, Nolan Gorman last year, and gotten a whole lot more than you would right now. That was the whole thing even with Paul Goldschmidt this trade deadline. It was like nobody's going to trade. Nobody's going to give you what you want for these guys for the most part, because they're going to see what they're doing. Even if they think they can fix them or there's a rebound in them, they don't trade for the rebound. They trade for what's there. And, with Helsley and with Contreras, those are the two guys that you could trade. I wouldn't say necessarily. Well, Helsley probably is at the top of his value. Contreras is pretty close. So in theory, you could get some quality back. Now, again, I'm not necessarily advocating for trading for, especially Contreras. I think there's some value to have him there, and I think, obviously Herrera and Pages both have some issues behind the plate. But you're going to have to do some things you don't like to fix this team, and that may
Sure.
be one of them.
No, I agree, and that's something that I hadn't thought about, because I'm a big fan and would not like that move either. But it does go to, you're going to have to make some painful moves to improve. And honestly, their run prevention from that spot is terrible.
Yeah.
The athletic teams destroy the Cardinals. They cannot hold guys. They run on them like mad. It's nuts. And I'm not saying this is Contreras' fault, but that's an area where I wonder too how much you can lump in the idea of Contreras and Goldschmidt still being on the same team and having enough at bats, because I would assume that Contreras is going to be the right-handed DH for a while. You know what I'm saying? And he'll be in the lineup every day. You know, he's a catcher number one. Don't get me wrong, but he'll DH a lot. Is there going to be enough at bats for both of them? I mean, I'm sure you can justify giving them both. I mean, they're both stars. You know, one on the downslide, and one. I mean, Contreras is early 30s too, so that's going to start wearing on his body ultimately. but yeah, I kind of wonder how they're going to improve, and that concerns me because that's the guy that I think, okay, that's who you need to probably focus on offensively. Think of the other two as complementary, and add one more, and then you look all right. Then you added the pitching, of course. But yeah, they're going to have to figure out a way to stop guys from running. Without a doubt, whether that's on the mound, which is probably 90% of the problem, but catching has been terrible for them as far as getting those things done, stopping the running game.
Yeah, I was trying to find out where the Cardinals ranked in stolen bases allowed, and
yeah,
I pulled up some weird thing, but it looks like this one looks like it's averaging it out per game. And if I'm reading this right, the Cardinals are 29th in the league, allowing almost a stolen base a game, 0.94.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
No, the
Guys
Giants
run
are
on them
30th.
like crazy. I don't know if I've seen them throw somebody out this year, and I watch every night.
Yeah, Contreras got a couple of guys just recently,
Yeah,
like in the same game. But yeah, I agree. I mean, for the fact that the Cardinals have Victor Scott and Masyn Winn, they don't run nearly as much. So if they're stolen bases in a game, it's always against them. By the way, Giants are 30th at 0.95. So it's they're basically the worst in the league. And after the Yadier Molina era, that's a little bit surprising to have to deal with. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, but the best option is to keep those guys off the bases in the first place, which would go back to, getting better pitching. But with baseball is emphasized some of that, right? With the bases and all that kind of stuff. So, if you can't beat them, join them. I'd like to see the Cardinals do a lot more of that. And, again, once Victor Scott's still learning, he's got, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 this year. As he gets comfortable in the league, I'm sure we'll see some more of those. I don't know that we're going to see like a Vince Coleman type 100 or something like that, even though he's got that kind of speed. And Winn has stolen some. Heck, we saw a game this week that had Alec Burleson and Lucan Baker steal bases. So, I mean, it happens. But it would be nice to see. It feels like they don't use that option as much as they probably should, for the fact that their offense has been so stagnant at times.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because I think that you do have some athleticism that you haven't been able to focus. I mean, right now you have 3 guys in the lineup that don't strike out a whole lot in Burleson, Winn, and Donovan, and I think you can move guys in front of them and whatnot. And that's, I don't know. I feel like you're going to have to kind of rebuild the offense a little bit, and I really hope that Walker and Scott can start taking off a little bit, and because then you're pretty athletic with those two. Your stolen base leader hadn't played in a month in Siani. You know what I mean? That's and I don't know. It's that's tough to justify right now. I don't know if you can afford to go in waiting for the extra base power to score runs, because I don't know if they have it anymore. And I think that you need to turn that into creating an athletic team, because it really blew me away. I mean, look at Milwaukee's lineup, and they got a 10-game lead in the division.
Yeah,
and Yelich has been out. You know what I mean? There's way to reinvent it. There's way to score runs. You just have to be a little bit more creative and accentuate some of the athleticism that these guys have, because that's exactly what the league wants to bring in. And you know what is how much of the attendance issue, how much is it the fact that they're kind of boring? I mean, they've had that rut for the last 4 or 5 years, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of it. Like I said, if you were 500 ball but playing, Whitey ball to some degree, I think personally, Whitey ball gets a little bit too lionized for today's game. I don't think you could bring it to today's game.
No, I agree.
If you had that kind of thing, or that kind of motion, that kind of, ability to to add a little bit of excitement. Yeah, I mean, crowds are still going to be down. I mean,
Sure.
because there's a chunk that if they're not winning, they're not going to be there. But I think it wouldn't be quite as noticeable because there would be some excitement about it. And that's and again, I think that's something to watch in September because as now that you've got this lineup that's got all these young guys, do people and the weather starts to get a little bit better and ticket prices will probably they'll probably have some deals. I know there's a $6 McDonald's deal running right now or something like. I mean, I just wonder if they're they may not have a few crowds that are pretty decent. They're not going to have full crowd or anything like that. But if they can get back into that 30, 31, 32,000 level, because of the players that are on the field, I don't know. There's also some that once they've checked out for the year, they're checked out. And
Sure.
that's and football's come on and people shift in mindsets. So I don't know. But yeah, I think that I'm really interested to see how they let this team run and what it looks like as they do.
Yeah, that will be the excitement. I mean, it's one of those to where I look forward to watching this series in New York. You don't see, what I mean. It's you you never want it this late, but essentially we know where we are.
Yeah.
So enjoy it. Watch the lineup tonight. Let's see what happens and enjoy it night to night, and then let's see how bad the attendance is next week. Because I was going to say you have the Cincinnati series, which is also it's kind of one of those mundane series, middle of the week, and one of those is a day game. So I would expect it to be pretty terrible.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a divisional rival, but neither team's going anywhere, so
Yeah.
it does become a little harder to. And there's not a. I mean, maybe people come out to watch Ellie De La Cruz or something of that nature, but there's not necessarily just a whole lot of star power on the Red side. I think they're
No.
building a decent team, but it's not necessarily hey, we gotta go see this guy. So yeah, I think you're probably right. Before we wrap it, you did mention you talked about Siani, and he's probably coming off the injured list, maybe as early as midweek.
Yeah.
And he'll probably be the guy that I really wish they still had the expanded rosters. I mean, real expanded rosters, right? Bringing up two guys, adding rosters by 2 spots is nothing. I mean, and that's the Cardinals are bringing up Steven Matz, so we'll take that one spot on the pitcher side, and it'll probably be Michael Siani on the hitter side. And what's the excitement there? I mean, if you could do a 40-man roster, then maybe you do see a McGreevy and a Graceffo and all those kind of guys come up. But baseball does what baseball does, which is
Sure.
be stupid. But anyway, Siani could be back midweek. What do you do then?
I've wondered about that.
Yeah, Siani was like one of your best players when he went down. He plays great center field. Like you said, he's leading the team in steals. But you got Victor Scott 2 up now, and you want to take a look at him, obviously. I mean, how does that balance? Do they send Victor Scott 2 down back to Memphis for that? I mean, I feel like he has. I don't want to say he's got his feet. Well, he's looking better. He obviously looks a lot better than he did this earlier. I don't know whether he's ready for the major leagues, but he's a lot closer. Do they send him down, or do they? They're trying to use this month to see what they've got. I don't know what center field looks like when both of those guys are available.
Yeah, no, you're basically the same player. That's I thought about that early in the season. Yeah, it's a good question because it seems like they're calling everybody up to play as much as possible. What's Siani's contract status?
Oh, he's not. I don't know that he has a contract. I mean, I think he's probably still, at most, he's probably going to be arbitration eligible at the end of the year. I mean, they'll have control over him for another few years.
And all these are pretty easy.
Yeah, let me pull this up real quick and see.
But it's not like it's going to matter. I mean, you can't make a.
No, yeah, Siani is. Yeah, he's pre-arb for the next 2 years, so he's league minimum. Just like he's basically on the same contract Victor Scott is, because he doesn't have any. He didn't have but a game or two of major league experience before this year. And I think Kyle Reese mentioned it this week in his Twitter that he's afraid that the Cardinals would fall too much in love with Michael Siani and what he's done, and that's and that's fair, right? I mean, Michael Siani's 25 versus Victor Scott being not. I can't find it right now. So I think that, man, I feel like you still run Victor Scott out there, and you let Siani play here and there. But I mean, at best, Siani's going to be a bench defensive guy when your team is good.
Sure.
And maybe Victor Scott could be more than that.
You know what? I'm drawing a complete blank, and I'm sorry. And I'm lazy to look it up, but Siani reminds me of the outfielder that they traded last year that finished real strong. Who's the one that went to Tampa Bay? Has the brother?
Richie Palacios.
Yes.
Richie Palacios.
See, that's what I get. That's the feeling I get out of Siani. If they feel like Scott's your everyday guy next year.
Yeah. And he didn't. Palacios has done some good over in Tampa Bay. He's not been necessarily one of those guys that everybody remembers the Cardinals giving up on, type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I maybe it would be interesting if they could find a team that was interested in swapping for a defensive first center fielder or some sort of bullpen arm, because they're gonna have to do probably some work in the bullpen as well.
Yeah.
Although we have seen good stuff out of Matthew Liberatore lately. I think maybe he's finally found the niche that works for him. Right? It's not what we thought when they traded for him, but if he can be an effective, and starting to get a little bit higher leverage innings, I mean, he could be a real big role of this next year.
Sure. Yeah, that's they want. I think that just like us, no one has kind of figured out who he is. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what they do with Middleton and things of that nature. But there's always going to be room to add arms to the bullpen. I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see what they do the next month with those two guys. I hope they if they're going to go with Siani, I hope they just go ahead and send Scott down, let him play every day in Memphis. I don't know that it does him a whole lot of good for them to kind of split those guys. If anybody's going to ride the bench, I think I'd rather it be Siani.
Sure. No, I agree with that. Just another one of those, curious situations that we're going to have.
Yep. Always something. So, busy week this week. Hopefully, I mean, obviously it'll be a little bit calmer next week. We'll be back at you next Saturday, and we will talk about, the end of the Yankees series, and maybe people will show up a little bit more. We'll find out. But until then, for Alan, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Good night.
Now Roland with a chance to give the Cardinals a lead for the first time tonight, which he